Hey guys, it's 11.4, circumference and arc length. Got two equations here. First of all, we've got the circumference of a circle, c equals pi times diameter, or probably you guys know that c circumference is 2 pi r. That last one's probably the more familiar one out of the two. And then we also have, this is a new one, the arc length of a circle. And this is supposed to be like a cursive L. So arc length is equal to the measurement of arc AB divided by 360 degrees times 2 pi r. Now, a couple of things to make this equation a little bit easier to remember. Think of it as the arc length is basically a fraction or percentage of the total circumference. You see that 2 pi r is the total circumference, and that appears right here as well. You just have a fraction in front of it. So like, let's say you want the arc length with half the circle, it would be 180 over 360, which is a 1/2, and then half of 2 pi r for the arc length. Also, another thing here is that, remember this measure of the arc, that arc is the same as the central angle. If we were to connect A, P, and B with lines, the angle in between them would be the central angle, and that's the same as the arc AB, as we learned last chapter in chapter 10 on our circles chapter. All right, let's take a look at some circumference questions first. Example 1a, find the circumference of the circle with radius 6. This should be pretty straightforward. You've probably been doing this stuff since middle school. You take your equation 2 pi r, put in 6 for r, and then work it out. For pi, it's on the calculator. Press second, and then there's on the graphing calculators, there's that little hat symbol over on the right side of the calculator, so you can actually use the symbol pi. You could also use 3.14 if you can't find a pi or a calculator with pi on it. That would work as well. So anyways, you do 2 times pi times 6, and it'll be 37.70. All right, we're going to go to example 1b. This time they ask it backwards, so they give you the circumference. You've got to come up with the radius. So we still use the same equation, c equals 2 pi r, but this time the 31 is a circumference. So that's going to go on the left side instead of the right side in for r. It's going to go in for c. And now we've got an equation with just one letter, it's r. Remember, pi is a number, 3.14. So a couple ways that you can do this. What I like doing is multiplying out 2 and pi together first to get 6.28, and then I'm going to divide that over. So I have 31 divided by 6.28. That equals 4.93. A couple other ways you could do it. You could divide by 2 and then divide by pi. That should give you the same answer. All right, so try the on your own. Find the circumference of the circle with radius of 5. Use c equals 2 pi r. Pause the video, figure it out, and then once you've got it, resume it, and we'll see if you're right.
Quarantine log number 50. Me and Spaulding got into a fight yesterday, and I'm not talking to him anymore.
All right, so we're going to use our formula, c equals 2 pi r. The r is 5, so I do 2 times pi times 5. If I entered that incorrectly, it should be 31.41. Just a note, if you are a little bit off, like 31.3 or 31.5, you may have rounded pi a little bit differently, and that's okay. As long as you're ballpark close to 31.41, I would accept it. All right, let's look at example 2a, looking at our arc length equations now. So find the length of A to B. So we have our formula. Now the arc AB, remember that's the same as the central angle, which is given here as 50. So 50 is going to go on top of the fraction over 360, 2 pi, and then r is the radius, which is 5 based on the picture. All right, so then I would just plug all this into the calculator, and you should get 4.36. If you're putting it into the calculator, you may want to do 50 and then divide it by 360 and then times 2 times 3.14 times 5, and that should give you 4.36. Okay, try the same thing with the on your own question. You've got a radius of 7, central angle of 60. Use the formula, pause the video, figure it out. Once you've got it, resume the video and see if you're right. All right, we could use our formula. L equals measurement of AB over 360 times 2 pi r. The measurement of AB is the same as the central angle, 60 degrees. It's going to go there. R is the radius, 7. That's going to go the very last. And you do 60 divided by 360 times 2 times pi times 7. And that should give you 7.33. And again, if your decimals were like a little bit off, you may have rounded pi to 3.14. You may have actually used pi. So you can be a little bit off on that. But as long as you're somewhere near 7.3, I would take that. Okay, example 3a. Find the circumference. And we don't have r in this case. So we've got to figure out what r is. And then use the circumference equation to get the circumference. Okay, how can we get r? Well, we've got an arc length and we've got a central angle. So I can use that arc length equation to figure out what r is first. So let's take a look at that arc length formula. L is MAB over 360 times 2 pi r. I don't have r, but I do have the arc length. That's the 3.82. And I do have MAB, because that's 60. So I'm going to plug those in, 3.82 for L and 60 for MAB. And now I've got an equation with all numbers except for the R. So it's something I can solve out. And just like I did a couple of questions ago, I'm just going to get the decimal form for 60 divided by 360 times 2 times pi. Okay, when I do that, 60 divided by 360 times 2 times pi, I get 1.047, and then r. And now I can divide this over to the other side. So I do 3.82 divided by 1.047, and that gives me 3.648. Now I've got a measurement for r that I can use in the circumference equation, 2 pi r. Okay, so I take that answer and do 2 times pi times the 3.648, and that comes out to 22.924. So that's the circumference of this one here. So you see what we did there? We had to first of all find r, because I need an r to get the circumference. And with what I was given, I had to use the arc length formula, because I was given the arc length here, and to figure out what r was. Once I got r, I could put it in c equals 2 pi r and get the final answer. Okay, so you try the same thing. It's the same setup, just some different numbers here. And pause the video and see if you can find the circumference. And once you've got the circumference, resume it, and we'll go over it.
Me and Spalding are best friends. No, Spalding! No, Spalding! 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 Are you there? Are you there? Spalding! Spalding!
Okay, so normally when I find circumference, I need the radius, because I do 2 pi r. But I'm not given the radius in this picture here. So I've got to use what I'm given, and I have a 5.5, which is an arc length. So I'm going to start off with the arc length formula and put 5.5 in for L. And I have an MAB, that's the central, well, it's the arc length, the measure of the arc, which is the degrees, the 55 degrees. And the rest of these are in the equation, 360 and 2 pi. So if I do 55 divided by 360 times 2 times pi, that would give me 0.960. And then I want to divide that over 5.5 divided by 0.960. and that gives me an r value of 5.73. So now I've figured out what the radius is of this circle. I can now go back and use the circumference equation, 2 pi r, using 5.730 as r, and then working that out in the calculator. Hey, look at that, it comes out nicely to 36. So the circumference is 36. Okay, one last question, and that is finding the measure of the arc x, y. And they want that's the measure in degrees. I'm having an m like that. They want it in degrees. So don't just say, oh, that's 18 inches, we're done. No, we have to find what degrees that is. Okay, so again, I've got to use some of my formulas here. I've got an arc length, so that tells me I'm going to use the arc length formula right here. The mxy, that's basically mab, right there on the top of the fraction. Arc length is 18, and I've got 362 pi, and then r, that was the radius, 7.64. So I'm given, basically I have another equation here. My x of the equation is this mxy part. Now I can kind of rearrange this equation. All this right here is just being multiplied together. So what I can do is I can basically swap these two places, because for multiplication you can swap the order of, like 2 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 2. And I'm just putting it on top of the fraction here and switching these places. But that way I can do 2 times pi times 7.64 divided by 360 in the calculator, which comes out to 0.133, and then divide that over 18 divided by 0.133 is 135 degrees. If you can, you probably want to keep a lot of decimal places, so don't just put like 18 divided by 0.1, because you'll be way off. Try and keep as many decimal places as you can to get somewhere close to 135. Okay, so try the same thing with this one. We've got an arc length of 8.4 inches. The radius is 4 inches, and find the measure of xy in degrees. So go ahead, pause the video, do it the same way as we did example 3b, and then once you've got it, resume the video, and we'll see if you're right. Okay, so we've got our formula. L is 8.4, that's the arc length. AB we don't know, we'll call that xy. 2 pi, and then r is the 4 inches on the picture. We can swap these places here, xy and the 2 pi 4, so that I can do 2 pi times 4 divided by 360, it's 0.070, and then divide that over to get the mxy by itself. 8.4 divided by 0.07 is 120 degrees. So that's going to be the final answer for this one, 120 degrees. So that brings us to the end of the lesson. So you are ready to work on the worksheets.
Quarantine day 93.
Well, Caleb, why have you been out here the whole time? Why didn't you just come inside?
I have been set free.